All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Recovery Talks. This is your mobile meeting. Okay, guys, so today we will be discussing Step 6. What is Step 6? It says we're entirely ready to have God remove all our defects of character. Okay, so at this point, you know that it says God instead of, like in Step 2, it said power greater than ourselves. And then Step 3, it says God as you understand Him. And now they just straight up say God. I know what's going on here. Right? Of course, that's what it seems like. But, again, you've got to remember who the author was. The author was Bill W. and about a couple hundred other people, actually. But there's a legend, and I'm not certain how true or false it is, but it sounds right, and I've heard it multiple times over the years. You could also take a look at a book by a gentleman who did his dissertation on the history of AA. I believe his name is Kuntz. But anyways, the book is called Not God. I don't endorse or not endorse it. That's just a book I read. So it's got a lot of information about the history of AA. And so there's the legend that goes that, Bill Wilson, one of the co-founders of AA, he was writing the steps, and he wanted there to be 12 of them because there were 12 apostles. Okay, so there's 12 steps, there's 12 traditions, there's 12 concepts. So what is it with this number 12? It's because of that, because Bill Wilson was at some point he became a Christian, although he certainly wasn't keen to that idea when Ebby. Was it Roland or Ebby? Roland. When Roland came to his kitchen and tried to talk to him about the Oxford group, which was, that was the movement that Roland had gotten sober in. It was sort of like a, I don't know how to describe it. They call it a first century Christian movement, and so basically, it was kind of like a commune. I'm basically trying not to say the word cult. I don't know if it was a cult or not, but anyways, this guy got sober there, and he was living with them, and they told him he had to go testify, and so he went and found Bill, and and he was telling Bill about, all the things that they had to do. He said, I found religion. So this guy was a bad alcoholic, and Bill knew it. And Bill was like, listening to him because he'd known that this guy was just as bad as he was, and he was 2 months sober. And then Roland could see that Bill was starting to get depressed, when he started to talk about God. And Roland was like, well, why don't you choose your own conception of God? And that was like a pivotal moment in our history. And even in the forward to one of the editions, it talks about how Bill couldn't accept all of the tenets of the Oxford group, but he was convinced of the need for admission of powerlessness, dependence on a higher power, confession of shortcomings, restitution, and so on and so forth, and also carrying the message, basically. So I'm paraphrasing, but if you go look in the forward to the first and second edition, you'll find this explanation about how Bill couldn't accept all the tenets of the Oxford group, but he could accept basically what came to be the 12 steps. And, that's common in groups today, by the way. There's a lot of groups that have a lot of tenets that I could not accept, but I am convinced of the need for the 12 steps. Okay, there's groups are just gone crazy these days. They, they try to tell you what to wear, where to sit in the meeting, what time to arrive. It gets a little wild, but I can understand why they would do that, because people want a sense of security and predictability. So, and there's a lot of, I don't know how much research. I read a paper that was, and actually, you know what? I didn't finish reading it, but it was talking about, there was some research done. I read the abstract. There was some research done about recovery rates and group cohesion. So there was some research done. They found that groups that have higher cohesion have higher recovery rates. So there you have it. People found something that worked and just kind of latched onto it, not even knowing why. So that happens a lot in AA. We don't really care why, we just care that it's working. And so here we are at step 6, talking about getting rid of things that aren't working. And so basically, in my experience, steps 4 through 9 are like all one big overhaul. Like they're basically all one big thing, broken down into several sort of like manageable steps. Step 6, in the big book, it doesn't have a whole lot about step 6, but that doesn't mean that you can't get a whole lot from it. When you do your 5th step, that 4th column and the person listening to you will help you to determine what are the patterns that are reoccurring in your life that are causing you problems. What are the quote-unquote shortcomings, however you want to call them, that are the major obstacle to you living a life without alcohol, and further than that, living a life that allows you to have, a certain amount of comfort in your own skin, and a certain ability to develop and maintain relationships with other people. So when you look in that 4th column, these are all the things in that 4th column. We should start to see a pattern emerge. You should start to see, that this is the thing I did here. I did it again here. I did it again here. It repeats. It's very predictable. And so these are the things that we start to realize we're entirely ready to be rid of. So, the assessment of these things in step 5 is what leads us to the conclusion that, I think I'm ready to try something different. And that's basically all it is we're saying, let's take something that's not working and exchange it for something that will work, or something that might work better. And so this step, it's about being entirely ready. Can you ever be entirely ready? Well, maybe, but if you've done a good job in the 5th step, then hopefully, and what I would tell you to do if I were your sponsor, or what I ask people I sponsor to do, is I say, okay, let's imagine that situation again, but let's visualize how would that be different if you had responded in this way. Right? If you had reacted in this way instead of in the way that you did. Not to shame you or to make you feel guilty, but to give your system, to give your brain, to give your insides an idea that things can be different. That you do possess the ability, and especially since a lot of the tension has been slowly releasing out of your life. A lot of the fear and a lot of the sharp edges on reality were starting to dull as we develop a life that has some routine, predictability, and sobriety. So as that happens, we can start to imagine a world in which we don't cuss out the customer service representative. we can imagine a world in which we don't get angry and not speak to our loved ones for 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or a year. We can imagine a world where we can react differently. We can have the feelings that we have, and also we can react in a way that doesn't damage ourselves or others. So again, it just depends on what your pattern is. What are the things that you're doing that are creating the problems in your life, that are creating the problems in your relationships? And it's going to be a pattern. It's going to be something that keeps happening over and over again. And there's going to be a narrative. There's a story that you're telling yourself. And how can we start to tell a different story? How can we start to tell a different story? In this step, we can start to visualize and imagine what that story might look like without these reactions and so forth that we used in the past. Okay, so that's step 6 in my experience. Hopefully this is useful to you, and I hope that you have a good, sober day.